Dear audience, welcome to the show POWERchat. In today's episode, we'll be discussing about environmental education and mountain tourism in Nepal. Joining us today, Mr. Ian Wall, CEO at Kathmandu Environmental Education Project, in short known as KEEP. Please allow me to welcome him. Welcome to the show, Mr. Wall.
Thank you very much.
How have you been?
Very good, very good. Eventually got here.
Working here in Nepal for a long time. Back in 2005, you
officially
came
moved.
here,
yes.
And you have been serving to many initiatives, especially in the environmental and mountain tourism issues, and now working with Kathmandu Environmental Education Project as the Chief Executive Officer. How do you evaluate the Nepalese initiatives on environmental education and awareness?
I think they're good. I don't think they go far enough. Obviously the schools and the middle educational programs, curriculum, cover environmental issues, and those go up to sort of master's degree level. And it will take a while for the training and the education to seep through. But one of the big problems at the moment is that the older generation and the more rural generation, I don't think are that familiar or really understand the essential requirements of protecting the Himalaya and the fragile environment. Everybody's meticulously clean, and they like their houses clean, they like their shop fronts clean. But where do they put the rubbish? I was in a hill community a few months ago, and Didi was very meticulously cleaning, and then she goes down to the river and throws it all in the river, and it's like, well, it's gone. But where does it go to? Oh, it doesn't matter, it's gone from here. And so, having a system is one thing, but implementing and monitoring is something totally different.
Do you mean that our education initiatives are not successful, injecting people about what is wrong and what is right when it comes to environmental protection?
I think it's right, but we don't have a good role model, and of course the infrastructure within the country is still developing. And I've just seen on the media that China has donated some road sweeping machines, and they're all sat idle because nobody knows how to use them. There's got to be a need. When people see the need, then there will be development. It's like a young child, probably the first thing she knows how to do is play with the remote controls, because they know that will change the television programme. That's what they want to do. And at the moment we have the pressing issue of climate change, global warming, plastic pollution, and Nepal really hasn't got a system, and Nepal is not on its own, but Nepal doesn't have a system to manage a lot of this non-biodegradable waste. And one thing that I've noticed recently is that as a result of maybe the 1936 earthquake, when buildings collapsed, they were reconstructed in the same method, in the same principle. Today, with the road access to a lot of these remote villages, steel rods, concrete, cement, all these raw materials are going into the villages. And they're going in these plastic bags or these polypropylene nylon sacks, and they're discarded, and nobody seems to worry about that. I went to a village a few weeks ago, and there were the blue and orange tarpaulins that had been given out by the NGOs. Initially they went over the houses, then the houses were sorted out, so they then went to the animal living areas, and then they get put onto the tractors and the carts, and then they end up on the floor in shreds, and but they're not picked up.
Why so happening, despite a lot of initiatives by both the government and non-governmental sectors? Why education or awareness related factors are not properly working here in Nepal?
I think the bottom line is there is so much to do that those people in charge, for whatever reason, take their eye off the ball, that they get diverted onto another, and they just assume that things will carry on. But in my previous life working here, I used to work in schools and I used to work with teachers, and you would try and explain different methods of teaching that would involve the children. Oh yes, very good, yeah. And as soon as you walk out the door, they go back to the old methods, because in their view, they're tried and they're tested, and they don't have to make a lot of effort to change their working style. But of course, you know, the world now is developing at such a progressive rate that it's essential that those people, especially in the environmental side of things, understand the reasons for not using plastic bags. And I mean, you know, the recent flooding, I don't have any idea of technical data, but you know, there's been so much development in the Kathmandu Valley that the natural drainage lines have been changed, blocked, or disappeared altogether. And then we have so much rain that it just washes the rubbish into the drains, which then blocks the drains. And so the water floods, it can't get away anywhere. So there's, I mean, all sorts of implications that the younger generation certainly need to take on board. And I think that will only happen if the government has a strict policy, and that policy is implemented and then monitored.
You at the beginning referring to the university education in environmental education or awareness issues. What is the difference between providing a degree to youngsters at the university and educating them in the real sense, so that they are aware about protecting our environment?
Yeah. I think a lot of the university work is theoretical. They do go out and they do work placements, but I mean there was a very good system, I think, back in the 60s where university students had to go and work in the villages to help educate the village people, and that was stopped for various reasons. But if that was implemented again, for example, I'm a teacher from the UK, and when I finished my university training, my teacher training, I then had to go and do 1 year's practical work to finally get the qualification. I mean, I don't know whether that is done now, because there is a lot of volunteer work done in Nepal. But I know people that do have these degrees and then they go into something totally different, because there are not the opportunities and the career structures maybe, or the career prospects maybe, to actually deliver. They have it in their heart, environmental education, environmental awareness, but they have to earn a living. And so maybe, selling cars gives them more money than, whatever opportunities are offered in environmental areas. Well,
Mr. Wall, people often take pride climbing, mountains. You climbed mountains at the age of 10. Don't you think that by climbing mountains, we are putting mountains at threat?
I do. But, my age and the age of 10, a few years between. And when I started, there were very, very few people actually involved. And certainly from the UK perspective, travelling abroad was expensive, or it took a long time because you had to go by sea. And in the main, unless you were very, very good, you had to fund it yourself. If you were good, you got on expeditions that had sponsorship, you maybe contributed to that, but there was an element of finance put in place. Today, it's a whole different ballgame. There are more people now, apparently, using indoor climbing walls as fitness arenas than they use the traditional gym. Because on a gym, you've got your headphones on, you're very sort of isolated, whereas on the climbing wall, it's very social, you can talk to people, as well as, getting the exercise and the power training. So the opportunities for, I don't even want to use the word mountain lovers, because there are a lot of people that climb for different reasons. And one of the biggest problems that is putting pressure on the mountains at the moment, I think, is very simply ego and greed. And I've spoken to many people who've climbed Everest. And before you ask, I haven't climbed Everest. But many people, well, what are you going to do now? Well, that's it. I've climbed Everest. Now I'm going to go and swim the Atlantic. They're not committed to the mountains. They don't have the love, the interest. They don't understand the history. They don't show the respect. They go for, not everybody,
and
of course.
And the criticism is also on, they are polluting the mountains.
Certainly, yeah, certainly. I mean, I would not disagree. But again, it comes back to respect. I mean, you will carry a bottle of water, which weighs whatever it weighs, and then you drink the water. The bottle's of no weight at all. Why not you carry it out? So again, it comes back to this educational issue. Education is a cornerstone of development in whatever aspect or area. And I think it's essential that, the youngsters understand the importance of not throwing litter about. And it's also got to apply to the foreigners as well when they come here. I mean, when Everest was first climbed, there wasn't the plastic issue, there wasn't, and to a certain extent, most of the rubbish from those expeditions, it's been admitted, went down crevasses on Everest. Nobody thought of global warming and the fact that 70 years later it would all come out at the bottom end of the glacier. They thought, it was going to be locked up for life. So yes, there is a great deal of concern. I have concern about what is going on. And with the commercial expeditions, I think there should be, again, greater monitoring as to what happens with the rubbish and sadly the bodies as well. And we have a system where the liaison officers, it's their job to make sure things go according to plan. But then we know from press reports that some of these liaison officers are not capable of actually going to a higher altitude or even staying at base camp for sufficient time to check and monitor what goes on the mountain, what comes off the mountain. So you have to rely on the individuals. And again, it's easier to come down carrying nothing than it is to carrying 5 or 10 kg of garbage. So I noticed that there was an interesting comment that you made earlier, are the mountains safe from people? Which is unusual because it's usually, are people safe in the mountains? And I think, no, the mountains are not safe from people. Again, coming back to global warming, we've got the ice, we've got the glaciers, and the mountains are changing. And because of the way...
I just want to put a few things on that. How can we make mountains safe alongside, promoting mountain tourism in the context of Nepal?
Rather a trite answer. The mountains are perfectly safe. It's when people get in the way that they become dangerous. So people need to understand that mountains are living things. The way the mountains have developed with the coming together of the two tectonic plates, they're unstable. And the thing that made them stable was the fact that they were glued together with ice. Now that the ice is melting, big chunks are falling off, the water is getting underneath the subsoil and causing landslips. You're not going to make them safe. We need to go back to another ice age where everything freezes up and becomes solid again. And all the time we get global warming and the ice is melting. And then it's been predicted that we're going to get extremes of hot, cold, wet and dry. Well, if we get extremes of wet, then, we're obviously going to get greater landslips. And I think it's difficult, and it's difficult when you put that into the context of mountain tourism. Because we need to understand why people come to the mountains. What do they expect? What do they want to see? They want to see a pristine environment without the rubbish. In mountain tourism terms, they want to see the white snow-covered Himalaya. Well, if the snow is slowly melting, we're getting exposed, very sterile, moraine sort of landscape, and it's going to take hundreds of years for anything to grow because the ground is sterile and because of the altitude. When this is happening in the Alps, within 5-10 years, there's bushes, there's trees, there's small forests growing on those exposed mountain slopes because there are still sufficient nutrients in the soil to allow the growth, and it's relatively lower. Here, it's going to take a lot of time for any sort of ground coverage to help stabilise, so that, you know, we're going to get in a more dangerous, if you will, mountain environment where there's going to be, you know, things aren't held together. The Lxaman Pass in Langtang used to be a good trek. Now it's very dangerous because there's constant rockfall, and, you know, it's very difficult for tourists to go across.
What is your experience? Why do people climb, you know, mountains? You climbed at the age of 10.
Well, that's when I started.
Do you think that the climbers can engage in environmental protection issues? You engaged in, but what is the overall message from the climbers at the moment?
Again, yes, they can. There has to be a willingness, but if you look at what we call in Nepal adventure tourism, the whole definition of the word adventure is that you don't know how long it's going to be, you don't know what the outcome is, and you don't even know whether it's going to be a successful outcome. And nowadays, that is not acceptable when you're paying $60,000 for Everest or even $5,000 for a trek. You know, people have a goal that they want to reach, and they want to reach it for a variety of reasons. We have obviously the Everest summiteers. They want to, you know, go to the highest point on Earth. But then you have people that do charity treks. They have to get to Everest Base Camp because they're raising money for an orphanage somewhere, or you know, so they have to get there. And to a certain extent, no matter what you tell them, no matter what you advise them, their focus is to get to the target. And if that means leaving something along the way, or even trekking to the detriment of their own health, they will do that just so they can achieve their goal. And then you've got other people who will come and they're just happy to go on a trek wherever it happens to be, and all they want to do is start and then come round and finish, and that is their goal. So people have got different objectives, and one of the interesting thing at the moment is that you get so many pictures of I'm at Everest Base Camp, but there's no picture of Everest Base Camp. It's the good old selfie that could have been taken anywhere. And why do people put so many selfies on their social media site? You know, it's maybe self-promotion, or it's about me rather than about the mountain. So there has to be a big swing in public attitude. We now have a rapidly increasing domestic tourism market, and a lot of these people have no idea about mountain tourism. The new roads are in. You can now drive to Lxaman on a motorbike, no problem. And, you know, you're at quite a good altitude. They don't understand altitude issues. And maybe they take some of the bad habits of throwing the rubbish in Kathmandu up into the mountains, and they can't see that it's wrong. They don't understand the effect. And I honestly don't believe that it's not that they don't care. They do care. I think they just don't understand the implications of their actions.
Well, you elaborated many issues, especially that of how mountains are at danger. Also, our cities are in danger
of course,
in terms of the environmental protection.
Yeah.
What are the key environmental challenges in the context of Nepal, and how can they be addressed?
I think Nepal is just coming out of a prolonged and unsettling political time. During that time, obviously, a lot of people came into Kathmandu because it was deemed to be a safe haven as opposed to out in the hills. And during that time, there was a lot of land dealing, which, shall we say, might not have been, appropriate at the time. And there was certainly a lot of uncontrolled building. And I don't know what the government building land regulations are. I am assuming that they have some. But as we know, And as somebody once told me, anything's possible in Nepal if you have money. So I think, at that time, building and, if you want to call it development, took place without addressing issues of the environment. We have, look at the state of the Bagmati. That is purely man-made. And it's only
billion of rupees, is spent for cleaning Bagmati.
Yeah.
And last time during the flood,
Yeah.
all dust and pollution swept away.
Yeah.
By the flood of a week
Yeah.
long. How do you compare this to the money we invest in the name of environmental protection?
Yeah.
Are you pointing out to the fact that the resources are not appropriately utilized?
I can't say that because I don't have professional inside knowledge of that. But from a bystander's point of view, I could see a way of solving a problem. And I get told so many times, you're not Nepali, what do you know? And I could see a way of possibly trying to clean up the Bagmati. But from the dust and the dirt point of view, of course, when it rains here, that water will wash the dirt that is on the road out. But the water that's coming off the hill, the flood water that's coming down and not going down the drains, of course that's bringing more dust and silt down with it. So it's an ongoing circular journey. The water goes out, the rain brings more dust. So until the ground is either concreted over, or better still, it's got more trees planted to hold the topsoil in place, we're always going to get this seepage of dust coming down in the monsoon, in the water from the valley hills. With regard to rubbish, I guess if you go far enough into the hills, there comes a point where the streams are clean, and the further downstream you go, the more rubbish gets thrown into it. And then ultimately, all the rubbish of Kathmandu will end up going out of Kathmandu, or it's stuck all along the side of the Bagmati when the water level goes down.
Well, how do you measure the impact of your work, especially your engagement with, the project called Kathmandu Environmental Education Project?
Well, KEEP, as we refer to it, has been established and running now successfully for 27 years. So if you go back to the early 90s when it was formed, obviously the environmental issues were different, and the mountain tourism industry was different. The expectations of the clients were different, and the numbers involved in mountain tourism were different. As we've gone through those 27 years, KEEP has had to change to bring itself up to speed with the requirements of the tourism industry and the requirements of the environment protection. So we need to do training programs that help get the guides and the porters up to a standard where they can match the expectations of the clients. And there's a lot going on in the media and in various organisations and associations at the moment that are trying to promote compulsory guides, trekking guides. I personally think that's wrong. However, I do agree that having a guide greatly enhances your experience of trekking in the mountains of Nepal. Now, people want to know the names of the mountains, the villages, they want to know about the political situation, they want to know about what's happening with all the permits and ACAP and NCAP. They're interested. And the other thing is, of course, with internet, very few people actually wake up today and say, I'm going to go to Nepal tomorrow. So between deciding to come here and actually coming here, they will spend a few months researching not only the trekking area, but the mountains, the names, a lot of information. And so when they come, now they're sort of saying, I know it all, and we've got to make sure that the guides are trained up to match the client's expectation of local knowledge. And, to be able to do that means that a lot of financial resources need to go into manpower services. You know, we're talking about, we've got 4,000 extra hotel rooms in Kathmandu. How much money has been putting in training the staff that are going to work in those hotels? You know, I mean, we can all, those people that have travelled can recognise good and not so good practices of serving food at a dinner table, you know. And if we want to raise the level of tourism and the level of the client's spending, then we have to raise the standards. And it's not all about quantity, it's about quality. And so, to answer your question, it's very difficult to have a benchmark and see how you've improved. Obviously, there's more people working in the industry. From my own personal experience, when I go out in the hills, I always meet somebody who says, hello, we've been on a keep training course, and you know. So Keep has still got an excellent reputation. We're non-political, we're unbiased, and those people that come through our training programs are grateful and often share their knowledge and gratefulness, certainly with me, and I know with other staff. So how do we measure? It's difficult to measure, other than on, you know, public comment and feedback.
Well, Mr. Well, there are many interesting issues, but we are coming to the end of the show. Do you want to share anything very quickly to our audience that I have left to ask you?
No, I mean, I think Nepal's got tremendous, you know, Nepal is the mother of mountain trekking and the trekking industry. Other people look at Nepal, see what we've done, and then they go and decide what they want to use, what elements they want to employ in their own mountain tourism industry. I think maybe now is the time that Nepal needs to look at some of those more developed or more recently developed countries to see what is working for them, because we need to develop a broader base. You know, if somebody's been here 5 or 6 times and the weather's bad, they've already been to Boda, they've already been to Pashupatinath, they've already been to Bhaktapur. They want something new, they want something different. And at the moment we're not able to provide that. So I guess I've got, you know, 2 comments. One would be to ask the government to maybe develop a more proactive tourism plan that addresses the future rather than the present. And then maybe we've obviously got the issues on Everest to resolve one way or another. But the general public, you know, Nepal's a beautiful country. There is so much that can be done, and there's so much potential that it really needs somebody to focus on, you know, what we can provide if we want to develop our place in the tourism division.
Well, Mr. Wall, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
Good.
Dear audience, time now to wrap up the show. Keep watching us. See you next week. Namaste.